Welcome to a very special Porsche RS head-to-head comparison video. I'm currently sitting in a 2024 Porsche 718 Spyder RS with the Weissach package, and I'll be comparing it to a 2019 Porsche 911 GT3 RS from the 991.2 generation. This particular Spyder RS with the Weissach package and the magnesium wheels had an MSRP of right around $225,000. On average, a 991.2 GT3 RS is around $200,000 to $250,000, so split down the middle, and that's right at basically the MSRP of this Spyder RS. So the question I want to answer today is, which Porsche RS is the better driver's car on a technical winding road? The Spyder RS obviously is designed primarily as a street car. It's softer than its brother, the GT3 RS. And the last time I drove one, although that one did not have the Weissach package and I mistakenly said that it did, apologies for that, I ended up ranking the Spyder RS my #1 car on my Zygrene Performance Index, tied with the McLaren 750S. Link to that index in the video description. So now I'm driving the Weissach version, and this one has the Dunlop tires, which is all the better than a Cup 2, because as you can see, the road today is quite damp. So a few specs about this RS. It's powered by a 4-liter naturally aspirated flat 6 engine, and it revs to 9,000 RPM. It makes 493 horsepower, 331 pound-feet of torque. A 7-speed PDK dual clutch is your only choice of transmission, and this car weighs around 3,200 pounds with the Weissach pack. So a few things. Compared to the GT4 RS, this has softer suspension. The spring rates are roughly 50% softer front and rear. The sway bars and dampers have been retuned, and the steering rack, this EPS rack, has been retuned to feel less darty. We have less aero, a smaller splitter on the front, a ducktail spoiler in the back instead of an actual wing, and it doesn't have all the fancy underbody aero. This particular car is spec'd out in the launch color, which is vanadium gray metallic. The Weissach package costs about $12,500. We also have the Porsche carbon ceramic brakes, which is an $8,000 option, and the very expensive but very beautiful $15,600 option magnesium wheels. The only mod on this car is an aftermarket JCR silenced mid-pipe. Let's start with this as the benchmark. Literally the very best car I've ever driven, and see how it compares to the last gen GT3 RS. Manual mode, PDK Sport. We'll leave the PASM adaptive dampers in the softer setting. We'll open up that valved exhaust, and we're gonna keep all the systems on because, as I mentioned, it's quite damp. This one also has front axle lift, which I will happily use to get out of this gravel lot. Take it a little easy, get some heat into the tires. Oh my God, that sound. Even short shifting at 6,000 RPM, it sounds incredible. It's pure motorsport. I don't know if you can even hear me over that induction note. This car does have the side carbon intakes, just like the GT4 RS. So it pipes that sound directly into your ears. Whoa. Really can't fault this transmission at all. And the gearing is nice and short, but not too short. You really get to wring this engine out even on a winding road. Traction limited here. Very surprising amount of mid-range torque, even from about 5,000, and it has that instant throttle response. Very firm brake pedal, easy to modulate, and very sharp steering, but definitely less darty than the GT4 RS steering rack. Much appreciated for a road car. This car feels less nervous, especially with the retuned suspension. It's moving around. The road conditions are far from ideal for this powerful of a mid-engine sports car. Almost 500 horsepower in a 3,200 pound package. Let's do one straight line pull. Let's see if we can find traction here. Oh my goodness. Oh, really had to feather the throttle there. Even the feeling of this steering wheel, so nice. touch points, the controls are excellent, and I actually love using this shifter as if it's a sequential. And here's what I'm really impressed by. This suspension. In the softer setting, these PASM dampers do a great job soaking up all the bumps and dealing with this very wet road. Oh yeah, amazing bump absorption. It keeps the car nice and flat in the corners. Push past about 6-7 tenths today. There's some standing water here. Gonna take it super easy. Oh my god. Once this engine comes on boil above around 6,000, it pulls so hard and it lights the rear tires up. Oh my gosh, my hands are sweating. This car is not easy to drive in wet conditions, even with these Dunlop tires, which are less aggressive than the Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2. Because it's a mid-engine car and it's traction limited, it wants to rotate so quickly, and you need to be ready for it and have very quick hands. Oh my goodness. This PDK is faultless. Even at partial throttle, the shifts are perfect. So much steering feel for an EPS. It's no Lotus Emira in terms of steering feel, or McLaren. Ultimately, EPS does not have as much feedback as hydraulic. Second gear here, being as patient with the throttle as I can, but also trying to push it just a little. Oh man. Not ideal conditions, but even then, this car still has so many highlights. Even at 6-7 tenths, I can feel that this car is tuned so well for a bumpy road. Compared to the GT3 RS I drove on this same road a year or two ago, this is much more approachable. The suspension is so much more forgiving, while still giving you a lot of communication through the chassis. You feel what each individual wheel is doing. And this one is spec'd out without the Porsche carbon buckets. These are the 18-way power adjustable sport seats, and it makes total sense the way the owner Steven spec'd this out. It's a road car. What an engine. When you really wind it out from 8,000 to 9,000 RPM, the sound becomes piercing, absolutely intoxicating. That rear-engined GT3 RS, although it also revs to around 9,000 RPM, because the engine's way further back and you don't have the carbon intakes right behind your head, will it sound less exciting? And will that car just be way too aggressive for the street? If you're someone who wants a Porsche RS product but doesn't necessarily want to track it, which car makes more sense? That's the question I'm going to answer here. All right, we're now in the 2019 Porsche 911 GT3 RS 991.2. What a special car. And this is the first GT3 RS I've driven since the 997 3.8 and 4.0. I've never driven another GT3 RS. So time to find out what a more modern GT3 RS feels like. The owner, James, who also owns the 981 Damon Boxster Spyder I reviewed not too long ago, has done similar mods to this car in the sense that, well, the engine's stock. There's no point swapping out a GT3 RS engine. But look at the interior. He's got these custom seat inserts for the Porsche carbon bucket seats. He modeled this after a Singer 911. And we have these amazing super clicky tactile magnetic paddle shifters. Like the Spyder RS, this is also powered by a 4-liter naturally aspirated flat 6 engine that revs to 9,000 RPM, but this one makes more power, 520 horsepower and 346 pound-feet of torque. 7-speed PDK. You could not get an RS from the 991 generation and on with a manual transmission. And like the 718 Spyder RS, this has strut front multi-link rear suspension. Of course, the 992 generation moved on to double wishbone front suspension. But this does have rear axle steering, which should help it feel extremely nimble in the tighter hairpins. This is a wider, longer, more imposing car than prior generation GT3s and GT3 RSs, but also the 718 Spyder RS. From the driver's seat, I can actually see the vents on the front fenders. So what does this have over a GT3 from the same gen? Well, we have NACA ducts for brake cooling, RS specific splitter and side skirts, carbon rear wing, carbon hood and rear deck lid, magnesium roof, a flat underbody, and these vented carbon front fenders, as I mentioned. So this makes about twice the downforce of the 991.2 GT3 at 125 miles per hour. We also have the wider turbo body style, so the track width front and rear is wider than a regular GT3. I think this is one of the most important parts that some people often overlook. The RS comes with ball joints on all the suspension links. The GT3 RS suspension also has front and rear helper springs, lighter, thinner glass for the rear and rear side windows. Porsche also recalibrated the LSD and the electric power steering rack, and we have these comical door straps, which probably save an ounce or two. So this car is riding on 20-inch front, 21-inch rear forged wheels. This is a non-Weissach package car, so it should weigh around 3,200 pounds, so almost identical to that 718 Spyder RS. This is the first GT3 RS in history to go sub 7 minutes at the Nordschleife. This one, I believe, did a 6:56.4, which actually made it 0.6 seconds faster than the 918 Spyder hypercar. And this car is optioned out with Porsche carbon ceramic brakes, front axle lift, extended leather, extended range fuel tank. For mods, the owner James has refinished the OEM wheels in Weissach gold, which is a white gold. It really pops the contrast against the black paint. He added some gold stripes and the black woven leather. And then we have a GT4 RS shifter, which is definitely a nice addition here with these JQ Works magnetic shift paddles. He added catted Dundon street headers, which supposedly add about 20 horsepower. So let's take this thing for a drive. Well, the startup immediately is quite loud, but it doesn't have that same zinginess even at low revs compared to that Spyder RS. I think that's down to the carbon intakes or lack thereof. We'll put it into PDK Sport. We'll leave the PASM dampers in the softer setting, and let's open up that exhaust valve. Into manual mode. All right, here we go. Cup 2 tires, very bad in the rain. We'll take it easy at first. Wow, with the Dundon street headers, this thing sounds really punchy on the downshift. Super immediate turn in. Downshifts, so punchy in terms of the sound. Oh my god, the rear wheel steering helping us get through these hairpins or low speed corners. Ooh, we're traction limited here. Cup 2 tires, not happy in the wet at all. Here's one thing I'm noticing over the Spyder. As I'm struggling for traction, sharper responses. Not in terms of the PDK, obviously. I think those are on par. But the turn in and the way that this car responds to bumps on the road is so immediate. Maybe that's down to the higher spring rates and damper tuning, or these ball joints on all the suspension arms. compression rebound, barely any vertical motion transmitted through my body. Amazing, amazing. I can't even speak right now. Holy super firm brake pedal. This is more confidence inspiring somehow. Oh my God, this car. Oh yes. The engine sound is not as crazy frenetic because the engine's all the way back there, but it still sounds pretty damn good. Listen to this. Actually, the brake pedal of this car requires a bit more effort than the 718 Spyder RS. I'm not sure why that is. I believe both cars are in stock pads. Oh my goodness, this car is insane. The engine does feel a bit more distant in terms of the sound, but I mean, come on. That is still one of the best sounding engines in the world. Super immediate downshifts. And just the way this car responds to steering input feels just a bit more immediate. The way it handles the bumps, so good. The damping is top notch. It feels like perfectly tuned MCS or JRZ motorsport dampers. Probably technically not that good, but at least on a canyon road, this is about the best suspension I've ever felt in a car. While we're stopped here, even though this is a 5 to 6 year old car now, this interior is phenomenal. Obviously with the upgraded JQ Works paddle shifters and this newer generation shifter and these amazing seat inserts, everything is a little elevated, but even then, this does not feel like the cheaper interior or older interior compared to that 5-year newer 718 RS. Both cars have amazing interiors, but I've always been a fan of the visual appeal of the 911 interior because the infotainment section and the dash just have a more upright look to it, and I kind of like that. We'll put into the stiffer PASM setting. Oh yeah, quite a bit firmer now in terms of the damping. That's too stiff. We'll turn that off. Woo. Pure motorsport. This car belongs on a racetrack, but the beautiful thing is it's not falling apart on this very tight, technical, and bumpy road. The extra aero of the RS isn't doing squat in these conditions, but just the suspension tuning and the steering, you can feel the differences compared to a regular GT3. I've driven several 991.2 GT3s, and this is next level in terms of the response. Watch this. Properly fast in a straight line, even though on paper you're not getting the most power for your money. Far from it. You can pick up a lightly used McLaren and have way more straight line speed, but in terms of the way this car handles, it is top notch. One of the best cars I have ever driven. I would love to take this car out for another spin sometime in the future when the weather's a bit more cooperative and the road is dry, but even then, wow, wow, wow. The RS badge really does mean something, even for street driving. This is really something else. When it comes down to it, between this and the Spyder RS, which would I have? That's such a tough question, but I'm gonna give you an answer. I'm not gonna leave this video on a cliffhanger. I would choose the 991.2 GT3 RS. And it's not necessarily because it's the better road car. The suspension in the 718 Spyder RS is a little more compliant for street driving, but just the overall presence of this car. Even though the engine sound, I think I would give it to the Spyder RS in terms of aggression, everything else, when you push this car, it feels that little bit sharper. So let me know what you guys think about this comparison. A big shout out to the owners, Steven and James. Which would you have for your $200,000 to $250,000? Let me know down in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.